Good morning, class. Today we are starting with the English language, chapter 15, Introduction to Auxiliaries. We have done a number of verbs, different forms of verbs, the base form of the verb or the past form of the verb, the past participle form of the verb, the ing form of the verb, or in the present indefinite tense where we use the s or es with the verb to use it according to the tense. Now, here, what are the auxiliary verbs? Auxiliary verbs are basically the helping verbs in the very simple language that we call the helping verb. Where we were discussing about the tenses, I told you a number of times this is the helping verb, this particular helping verb will be used with this particular subject. So, the use of the helping verb in the sentence depends on the subject of the sentence. Now, what are the helping verbs or the auxiliary verbs? Is, am, are, was, were, will, shall, has, have, had. All these which we have discussed while we were discussing about the tenses. There is a main verb in the sentence which denotes the action. What the particular action is done by the subject. He's talking, he's walking, he's reading, he's listening. Suppose he does not go to the school. I had my lunch. He was working in the evening. So here in these sentences, go is the main verb. Here, working. This is the main verb of the sentence. While this does, have, and was. These are the helping verbs, or you can say these are the auxiliary verbs in these sentences. Now, why do we use these auxiliary verbs? These verbs are always used before the other verbs. Whenever we are using, see in both these sentences, this is the main verb, this is the main verb. And the auxiliary verb is used before the main verb. We will never use the auxiliary verb after the main verb in the sentence. Auxiliary verb will always be used before the main verb in the sentence. So, these auxiliary verbs are used to form tenses, passive voice, questions, etc. See, in a number of cases, we can see that in a simple sentence, we do not require the auxiliary verb. For example, if we talk about the simple present or simple past tense, there we do not require the auxiliary verbs. Let's take an example. First, we will take the example of simple present. Priya eats her breakfast. In this sentence, this is the main verb of the sentence and we are not using any auxiliary verb. But when we have to make the sentence negative or interrogative, how we will write? For the negative, this is the affirmative sentence. Priya does not eat her breakfast. Or suppose if we have to make it an interrogative sentence, why does Riya eat her breakfast? So now in both of these sentences, we have this main verb, and along with this main verb, we have this helping verb or the auxiliary verb. So we require the auxiliary verbs to make the questions or the interrogative sentences or the negative sentences. Let's take another example, simple past tense. Simple past. Suppose he went to the market. Now, this is the affirmative sentence of the simple past tense. He went to the market. Now, went is the past form of the verb. The first form or the base form is go. Went is the second form of verb. We use this and some sentences complete. We did not use any helping verb or the auxiliary verb in the sentence. But when we will make it negative, he did not go to the market, or why did he go to the market? Then now in both these sentences, this is go, go. This is the main verb of the sentence. While did in both is the auxiliary verb or the helping verb. So we require auxiliary verbs to make the sentence negative or interrogative. And you can see in all these four sentences where I used the auxiliary verb, that auxiliary verb is used before the main verb of the sentence. So this is the way we use these auxiliary verbs to make the negative or the interrogative sentences. Then we use the auxiliary verb for representing different tenses. Suppose is MR is used, you know that this is the past, present tense. If was and were is used, then you know that this represents the past tense. Will or shall is used, then you know that this represents the future tense. Or here where we use does, this means this is the present tense. If we are using did, this means this is the past tense. We also use auxiliary verb to make the passive voice. How we use the auxiliary verb to make the passive voice? Let's take the first sentence only. Riya eats her breakfast. So if sentence, what we need to know? Breakfast is eaten by Ria. This is the passive voice of the given sentence. So when we converted the active voice sentence into the passive voice sentence, we used is as the helping verb, whereas eaten is the main verb of the sentence. Eaten is the past participle of the base verb eat. Eat, ate, eaten. So this is the way the auxiliary verbs are used. Or we can also use the auxiliary verbs to express possibility, permission, ability and obligation. Possibility, when we use the can, may, you may go, I can come, or when we are giving the permission, or when we are showing the obligation, or ability. For example, the verbs, the helping verbs that we have learned so far, we have learned in the tenses only. But apart from the tenses, there are some other helping verbs also, or the auxiliary verbs, such as can, would, may, might, would, will, shall, should, must, ought to. These are other forms of verb. In out of these, this will and shall we have learned in the tenses, but rest of the verbs we did not discuss when we were discussing about the tenses. So these auxiliary verbs are known as the models. We are also discussing about the models here. So these auxiliary verbs are known as the models, and we also use these in our sentences when we write or when we speak in English language. And there is two other things, the verbs that behave like auxiliaries. Need, there, or for the models, two verbs that can be used is need and there. These two verbs, these are basically these two are the main verbs, but sometimes we can also use these verbs as the auxiliaries and the models. Now, what is the main difference between the auxiliaries and the models? That models have one form only, and we do not change the model, and they do not have the endings like ing or ed, or we do not add anywhere s or es with the form of the verb. Whereas when we were using the auxiliaries, we do. So auxiliaries come before the subject in questions. Where do the auxiliaries come and can be put before? Not. They are important in the in the formation of negative questions, question tags, etc. we have seen that when we were discussing about the interrogative questions in the tenses. So there, when we were discussing about the interrogative questions, then we have discussed two kinds of interrogative sentences. The first one that starts with the question word and the second one which starts with the helping verb. Helping verb means the sentence which is starting with the auxiliary verb. Let's take an example. If he drinking milk. This is the interrogative sentence. This is the interrogative sentence which is starting with the helping verb in the present continuous tense. So here, this is the auxiliary verb. Drinking is the main verb of the sentence. And here the auxiliary verb is used before the subject. He is the subject of the sentence. So, we can also use auxiliary verb before the subject of the sentence to make it an interrogative sentence or to make it a question. We can start the sentence with the help of auxiliary verb or the helping verb. Or where we are using the helping verb to make a sentence negative, we can use the auxiliary verb before the word not. Not is the word in the sentence which denotes negation, which denotes that it is a negative sentence. So we can use the auxiliary verb or the helping verb before not. Take the same sentence. He is not drinking milk. Here, this is the auxiliary verb which is used before the word not to make it an negative sentence. So this is the basic structure for the auxiliary verbs and the models and why they are used and how we can use the auxiliaries and the models in the sentence.